What's going on, YouTube? Zach is back, and I'm so glad you're here. You saw the thumbnail, you saw the video title. You know what you're in for. It's my LATIOS guide. I've been talking about it for quite a while on my stream and some other videos with friends over Discord, and now I'm finally here making this. The biggest obstacle to me being here has been my very busy work schedule the past few months. So, if you do like my guides, if you want to see more stuff like this, two big things you can do for me. One is leave a like so I know that you enjoy this sort of content. And two is share it with friends. Share it with people that you know that like this sort of thing, that want to get better at LATIOS, that want to learn LATIOS, or LATIOS, whichever your friend wants to get better at. Share my channel with them, and I'm sure I'll be able to help them out. That'll really help get more views on this content. Let me know, hey, people actually do like this. I need to make more stuff like this. But with that said, I don't want to delay too much further before we get into it. The only note I will make is that I've also made a LATIOS guide. It's one of my most viewed videos on my channel. Obviously, because of the similarities between the two Pokemon, a lot of stuff on this guide is also on the other guide, and vice versa. So if you watched one guide and not this one, then it's going to be some repeated information. If you've already seen either guide, if you have not, then don't worry. I'm going to be explaining everything here as though this guide doesn't exist. So either way is completely fine. And if you have seen the LATIOS guide, then it'll be reminders. It'll be some information you maybe heard before, but it's not bad to hear it again. With all of that sorted, let's go ahead and get into it. As before, I'm using UniteDB for research. So if you want to do your own research, check my information, anything else like that, check it out. With that said, we'll start with the ability, because where else would you start on a Pokemon? After using a move, increases movement speed by 50% for 2 seconds, decaying 5% every 0.25 seconds. So this is the ability you always get, no matter who's on your team. And it really helps LATIOS stay alive by keeping you mobile after using moves. Normally, as an attacker, when you're using a move is when you're most vulnerable, right? The enemy team sees you stand still and casting, and they can come over and try to beat you up pretty much. And that's usually the threat on most attackers, right? Attackers tend to be pretty frail Pokemon, and LATIOS is definitely no exception. So the extra move speed you get does help you reposition and does help you stay alive. Now, there is an extra component to this move when you have LATIOS in the game. First of all, you'll have an extra 10% increased movement speed just passively all the time around LATIOS. I've tested the distance before, and it tends to work if you're on the same screen and sort of close to each other. It's hard. I know it's kind of vague and hard to explain, but without like a meter stick or like something in game that I can show you more clearly, it's hard to show. That said, when not in combat, you can use the ability Levitate. There's an active button for it on the screen to fly to your allied LATIOS. Goes on 90-second cooldown for both Pokemon after it's triggered. When you use it, you'll begin channeling the teleport, during which you can move around for another 2 seconds. And after the 2 seconds, you'll fly to where the beacon was dropped. When you press the button, it'll drop a beacon where LATIOS is. So if LATIOS moves, the beacon will still be where LATIOS was when you pressed it. And then after that 2 seconds, you'll fly to that beacon. Two things to note on this. First of all, you want to make sure that beacon, if possible, is dropped somewhere safe before you fly to it. Using your map is a big help here. Obviously, if your LATIOS is in trouble, you don't want to levitate to your LATIOS and get yourself in trouble too, now do you? You probably want to wait till LATIOS is somewhere in a bush or a little further away from enemies before you levitate out. The second thing of note here is if you get stunned or beat up or whatever during that 2 second levitate channel period, you will not fly to LATIOS. So it's really important that when you use the active component of this move, that you are somewhere safe where you're not going to be stunned or otherwise pushed or canceled out of using the teleport. One other thing to note, if LATIOS or, and I'm saying or because it says the opposite on LATIOS's page. So if LATIOS or LATIOS is in the home base, when the other uses Levitate, the cooldown will reduce twice as fast over the course of its duration. What this means is if you die in a lane, say with your LATIOS, you can levitate out and only have a 45-second cooldown on that levitate active. I will note that even though it cuts the cooldown in half, it does not show the cooldown cut in half on the timer. It'll still say 90 seconds. It'll just tick down twice as fast. Which I guess it does say here, the cooldown will go down twice as fast, but it's easier to just say it's a 45-second cooldown, which it is at that point. So that's Levitate in a nutshell. What other notes can I make about this move? It's very, very useful in a lot of ways, just for getting you around the map faster in a way that a lot of other Pokemon can't do. It's a pretty broken ability when you think about it that way, because it allows you really good repositioning. I mean, you can join team fights, objective pushes across the map, allows you to farm safely in your jungle or elsewhere, and then join in your team on a push or whatever else they're doing. It's really great for Groudon or other late game objectives, because you can be obviously fighting on one side of the map, or go to your base, or you can be farming and you can be ready to go where the rest of your team is. It really helps you stay in the fray as much as you want to, without having to always dedicate to following your entire team around. The other nice thing it does is it can offer interesting gank opportunities in lane, especially. If, let's say, you're in opposite lanes, then as a Latios or Latios, you can gank the other lane, and that can really help them with a push early on, or for countering the enemy mid coming, if they need the help, something like that, you know? There's a lot of versatility in the move, which is why I'm sort of talking about it the way I am. I will say that 90-second cooldown is really, really, really fucking long if you're not using it out of your base. So, really be careful when you use this move. Don't use it if you don't need it. Something interesting of note. If you use it when your ally is dead, you'll always go back to your home base, excluding if they've died within 1 or 2 seconds. If you use it within 1 or 2 seconds of their death, you'll fly to them still, but otherwise it'll just fly you back to your base. So don't use it in situations like that. And obviously, you want to be aware of what trouble you're getting into. So again, using your map is really key. I would really recommend, as you're using this move, as you're getting used to it, just getting used to looking around the map as well and saying, should I really go up there? Is that really where I want to levitate, before you press that button? Next, we'll talk about the basic attack. There's not very much to go to. It's just a really basic attack, sort of like Latios's. I mean, if you've played the Pokemon you've seen before, it's not really what you're here for. And you don't have boosteds either. So really, it's one of the least exciting aspects of the Pokemon. That said, it is still a decent range, and early on in the game, it does provide a little bit of decent damage, so I would say don't be afraid of throwing out attacks on your opponents just to help secure KOs whenever you can. But with that said, we will now get into the level 1 and 3 moves, Confusion and Swift. Swift is generally the better one, so we'll talk about that one first. It has a lower cooldown at 6 seconds. And it does a little more damage than Confusion. It shoots star-shaped rays in the designated direction, damaging opposing Pokemon in the area of effect. So it does create an area of effect that damages all the Pokemon in the area. This Swift is a slightly longer range than Latios's, but is not nearly as wide or cone-shaped. So you want to make sure that you're more on target when you use it. And you also want to make sure that, how do I put it? You're making use of the area properly. Aligning the hitbox over multiple Pokemon is really useful for a move like this in lane. So I would say really try to angle your Pokemon's body to where you can hit multiple enemies at a time with Swift is possible, because it will hit everyone in its area. So it's really useful in situations like that. The other move you will get level 1 or 3 is Confusion, which has an 8-second cooldown, does a little less damage than Swift, and it shoots a projectile that decreases enemy Pokemon move speed by 20% for 2 seconds. So obviously, in terms of securing last hits, this one's a little less good burst damage. And Swift, the damage comes out right away, pretty much. Confusion, it's a very slow and weak projectile. Well, not very slow, but it's slower than Swift, which means that you're going to have to predict a little better where you want the projectile to be before you use it. However, it does have longer range than Swift, and the movement slow can really help with keeping Pokemon from approaching or fleeing if you're trying to stay safe or secure KOs as they're fleeing from you in lane. Generally, when you're trying to secure with this move, I find it's best to use it with Swift. So I'll throw out the Confusion and then time the Swift to where both are hitting the target at approximately the same time, giving a little more burst damage to both, so to speak, giving you a better window of opportunity to try to secure last hits, ideally. And like Swift, you want to angle your body to where you can hit multiple targets where possible, especially since the move speed's the biggest thing separating this move from Swift. With that said, we will now get into the level 5 moves. And before I start talking into these moves in super huge depth, I'm first going to talk about how Eon stacks work. So Latios and Latios both when you learn your first upgraded move, so as soon as it's learned, you will start accumulating Eon stacks when A, you use that move to damage an enemy Pokemon, or B, you secure a last hit on a wild or enemy Pokemon using any move. So if you hit an enemy team Pokemon with the move, you will get Eon stacks. Or if you get last hits in any way, you'll get Eon stacks. For Dragon Pulse and Draco Meteor both, the last hit Eon stacks is 2, and hitting enemy Pokemon is 3 Eon stacks. And that means for each enemy Pokemon. So if you use a move that hits 3 enemy Pokemon, you'll get 9 Eon stacks. Pretty nice, right? That said, we will talk about what each of the moves do differently now. We'll talk about Draco Meteor first. It's the more popular one these days since they just buffed it. And I think it's a little more straightforward, although there is still some nuance to it. So here we go. Like I said, after learning this move, you'll get Eon stacks. When this move is used, 2 comets crash onto the designated area, damaging opposing Pokemon in the area of effect with each comet. This move gains 1 additional comet for every 25 Eon power accumulated, with a maximum of 6 comets at 100 Eon power. Subsequent comets that hit the same target deal 50% less damage. And that's 50% from the base damage amount, not the previous one. So if you hit it with 3 comets in a row, it'll be full damage and then 2 half damage comets. For every 1 Eon power accumulated beyond 100, increases comet damage by 0.5%, Eon power caps at 1099. And this is, again, works the exact same way on Latios and also Latios' other move. Once you get past the max threshold, you're just accumulating max damage from that point onward. So what you want to note when you're using Draco Meteor is the size and AoE of the circle. That's the biggest thing to keep in mind. And I took a screenshot from in-game to show you. This is the size of the total circle when you use Draco Meteor, and this is the targeting reticle that you'll use. But when you use Draco Meteor, within the bigger circle, smaller circles will appear showing you where the Draco Meteor comets are landing. So in this picture, for example, this little Bunnelby over here isn't going to get hit because it's not within the smaller circle. The larger circle will always contain all of the smaller circle, which means that as the smaller circle's moving around within the Draco Meteor targeting reticule, it'll generally always be hitting near the center of the circle for its damage. So if you want to be damaging a target or an area consistently, you want to center that area or target in the center of the larger aiming reticule. That way, no matter where the comets fall within the aiming reticule, they still have a decent shot of hitting your target. And of course, because of the large AoE, it's very easy to get a lot of Eon stacks with this move, hitting multiple targets, but it also has a lower cooldown, or a longer cooldown than Dragon Pulse to sort of balance that out. You're boosted at level 11 will give you an extra 3% damage mixing HP to the opposing Pokemon, and the damage caps at 300. So it just boosts your damage pretty much, and lower HP targets get hit more by it, or take more damage from it, which in general, because of the burst damage of the move in the late game, isn't really always relevant, but it's very, very relevant on tankier Pokemon. Defenders and supporters especially have a really hard time against Draco Meteor once you get your plus, because they're going to be pelted by lots of comets in a row, and it's very, very annoying to get hit by. One more note I will make on Draco Meteor is the circle and the comets hitting in the circle. Like I said before, it deals only half damage with each subsequent comet. So even if you're doing a lot of comets, the damage is only going to reach a certain threshold, A. And B, even when that threshold's higher than Dragon Pulse, theoretically, that relies on all the comets hitting the target, which means all those smaller circles have to line up on the target, and they have to stay in those smaller circles the entire time those comets are falling. Again, if you've played Latios at all, or if you know how Draco Meteor works, or if you've seen it in-game, you know most people are going to move out of the circle as soon as it appears, or they're going to try to anyway. So you want to generally try to combo it with walls, disables, anything else that can keep the enemy from easily escaping what you're doing. I don't really have a whole lot else to say. Like I said, it's the more straightforward move for sure. I can sort of consider it a mage Latios move because it works like a lot of other mage Pokemon moves, right? It's just a circle, you put it down, and it drops damage in that circle. I would say Draco Meteor is way, way better for ripping objectives than Dragon Pulse. but it has weaknesses in that it's a longer cooldown, and it doesn't really offer you the survivability aspect that Dragon Pulse does, I would say. That said, let's get into Dragon Pulse now. So as with the Draco Meteor, it'll accumulate Eon stocks as soon as it's learned, and when the move is used, LATIOS dashes forward, empowering the next basic attack used within 5 seconds to be a special boosted attack that hits in a straight line, damaging opposing Pokemon hit. The move goes on cooldown when the boosted attack is used or after 5 seconds. So when you use Dragon Pulse, you'll have a sort of stored boosted attack for 5 seconds, and when you use it, the boosted attack will be piercing, meaning it can hit multiple targets and it'll deal its damage to all the targets it hits. The move won't go on cooldown until you use this boosted or until those 5 seconds has passed, so do keep that in mind. It's not really the sort of thing you can throw out frivolously early on, especially when your cooldown reduction isn't really as great. Like I said, it's going to be gaining Eon Stack power at a similar rate and similar effect to this one. It's going to gain 2 projectiles at 25 and 100 power and 1 at 50 and 75 for a total of 6 projectiles. Subsequent projectiles hitting the same target deal 15% less damage, further decreasing with each projectile to a maximum of 75% less damage. And for every 1 Eon power accumulated beyond 100, the projectile damage increases by 0.5%. So again, it's all stuff you've heard before. And if you're looking at the damage numbers here, you'll note that even with 6 projectiles and the boosted attack being taken and accounted for, when you factor in the percentage decrease for each subsequent projectile on the same target, Dragon Pulse has a much lower damage potential than Draco Meteor. But what makes Dragon Pulse a little more reliable damage is as soon as the boosted attack hits, the projectiles cannot miss. They will for sure home in on their target. That said, the projectiles will split between the targets that your Dragon Pulse boosted attack hits. So if you boosted attack 2 different targets and you have 3 projectiles, one of them will get 2 projectiles, one of them will get 1 projectile. If you hit 3 targets and you have 3 projectiles, they'll each get a projectile. Or if you have 6 projectiles, they'll each get 2 projectiles. It'll divide it as evenly as possible, basically. What that means is they'll each be getting less reduction for subsequent projectiles, which means the move's total damage output can potentially be closer to Draco Meteor than you would otherwise think, which is pretty nice when you factor in A, Dragon Pulse is a lower cooldown, and B, the dash component is a huge, huge deal. Let me go back to that for a minute and really explain why I think this is a big deal. Like I said, LATIOS really struggles with survivability, so having a dash on an attacker is a really great way to stay alive. Not to mention, it combos really nicely with the movement speed boost you get of Levitate. What it means is after you dash, you're going to be moving faster, giving you even more distance on your opponent, whatever they're trying to do, whether they're fleeing on you or gaining on you. What else can I say about this? I guess Dragon Pulse is better if you want to stay mobile and move around the map and be able to more accurately intervene in a fight, whereas Draco Meteor is better for just raw damage output. They're both sort of technical in the way they work in different areas, but they both do the same thing, I think, in terms of your damage output if you're using the moves properly. Like if this is hitting multiple people, it's going to be closer to damage than this would be otherwise. And your boosted on Dragon Pulse is the same as Draco Meteor. The projectiles deal extra 3% damage, or 3% missing HP damage to the target, capping at 300. And in case you're curious, the reason it caps at 300 is so that you can't farm objectives too quickly. Otherwise, stuff like Groudon with a massive HP pool would take a ton of extra damage from that extra percentage HP. With that said, the other moves you have at level 7 are Luster Purge and Telekinesis. We'll talk about Luster Purge first since that's the simpler one. Let's loose a ball of light that moves in the designated direction. When used again, automatically after 0.85 seconds, releases the ball's light all at once, damaging opposing Pokemon in the area of effect and marking them for 3 seconds. This move then goes on cooldown. So, like Dragon Pulse, it's not going to go on cooldown until it bursts. And the way it bursts is it'll automatically burst after flying for 0.85 seconds, or when you press the button again to use the move, in which case it'll detonate early. And when it detonates, it marks the opposing Pokemon for 3 seconds, and while they're marked, LATIOS and any allied LATIOS deal 20% increased damage to marked Pokemon, and the mark can be cleansed, of course, by stuff like Full Heal. What's really nice about Luster Purge is how it helps you focus down targets and how it helps you farm. Obviously, when you're using it on wild Pokemon, it's just going to boost the damage of your other stuff to help you farm them faster, and it's going to chop their HP down faster, so you're getting the extra percentage HP loss damage from the projectiles of Draco Meteor, or the comets of Draco Meteor, or the projectiles of Dragon Pulse. And obviously helps Latios as well, which is really nice. Your plus move increases the mark duration to 6, and you'll note that the damage is slightly higher on Luster Purge at most levels, equalizing at about level 13 before telekinesis starts to do more damage. So for most situations, most practical purposes, we can consider Luster Purge the higher damage move, especially since it has the lower cooldown, giving it a higher DPS uptime, right? Not to mention, it's increasing the damage you deal. So Luster Purge is for sure the DPS move. If what you care about most is damage, I would say go for this. And if you picked Dragon Pulse, I would say Luster Purge is even better because, again, you're for sure hitting the target with your Dragon Pulse boosted attack, because it's an attack. The projectiles will lock onto them as well. And this move can be lower damage than Draco Meteor sometimes, so having a way to boost that damage really helps bring up the gap. With that said, we'll talk now about Telekinesis, the other option you have. Unleashes psychic power in the designated direction, damaging the first opposing Pokemon hit, decreasing their movement speed by 30% for 2 seconds, and marking them for 4 seconds. This move may be used again afterward, and when it's used again, it unleashes psychic power at another Pokemon or the same Pokemon, decreasing their movement speed by 30% for 2 seconds, again when it's hit. So what this move is doing is giving you 2 uses of an attack that slows the enemy down, which doesn't sound like too much use, but it gets better than that. If the target of the second use is already marked by the first use, or the first use missed, stuns the target for 1 second when the psychic power hits, consuming the mark. So this gives you a hard stun to disable opponents on top of the slow that the move gave you before. Really, really nice. If the target of the second use is a different unmarked opposing Pokemon, the 2 targets are pulled a set distance toward each other over 0.7 seconds. The 2 Pokemon are stunned for 1 second while being pulled together. If they collide with one another, they are thrown away from each other and their marks are consumed. So you can see the picture here, what it looks like when they get stunned, and that is about the distance apart at which they get pulled together with telekinesis. So it'll pull them for 1 second, for 0.7 seconds, and when they hit each other, they'll be stunned for another 1 second. So when you factor in the slow and the stun in the second part of the move, it's overall 3.7 seconds of hindrance on your opponent, which is really, really nice. A few things to note though: the first part of the move, when you're hitting with the first projectile and the second, only the first one deals damage. The second projectile deals no damage. So in terms of farm potential, this move is way less good than Luster Purge. That being said, it's way better for controlling fights, which I think makes it a good combo with Draco Meteor. Since Draco Meteor, they usually want to walk out of it, telekinesis can keep them in it. And it also gives you a way, like Dragon Pulse does, to sort of have more control over fights as a mage attacker. Someone who's very stationary and just wants to throw out their buttons. They don't want to be chased down a lot, so having a way to stun someone chasing you down is really, really nice. The plus move at 13 strengthens the movement speed decrease to 3 seconds. I would say both these plus moves are kind of mediocre. Maybe Luster Purge is a little better, but really, truly, you're getting these moves for what they provide you and what you need in your game. I would say Dragon Pulse Luster Purge is a good combo, and Draco Meteor Telekinesis is another good combo, but of course you can cross lines however you think is best depending on your own game state. As I always say in all my educational content, really truly, whatever works for you is what's best. You should figure out what you like and use this guide as a starting point, and then learn and experiment from there, figuring out, I actually like this moveset better, or I like this item better, and then that's how you improve with the game. So really, this guide's a starting point, and this information is a starting point as well. With that said, we'll move on from our starting point of Eon stacks and whatnot to our Unite move, Eon Blast. That is a 100-second cooldown, slightly lower than Latios's. So you aim at the designated Pokemon from the opposing team and charge its power for 1.8 seconds before releasing a pulse, damaging all opposing Pokemon hit. So you'll hit the Pokemon you target as well as any other Pokemon the shot passes through, with the line over the ground demonstrating where it's going to pass through. When you hit, resets move cooldowns immediately and increases cooldown duration to 60% for 9.5 seconds. That means that you have a really low cooldown on all your moves, so you want to spam shit as quickly as possible and start shitting out damage to kill people as much as you can. You also get the 6-second Unite buff duration for 30% movement speed, another 30% cooldown reduction, and 20% max HP shield. The cooldown reduction doesn't stack with the 60% one, but it will persist. Actually, it doesn't last as long as that one at all, does it? So it doesn't really do anything, but it still gives you movement speed and max HP, which is nice. There's also the component that combos with LATIOS, where if LATIOS also is aiming at the target, then both will hit the same target and explode, dealing extra damage. The explosion damage is dependent on whichever Pokemon targeted second. So if LATIOS targets someone first and then LATIOS targets the same Pokemon, the explosion will use LATIOS' damage. And vice versa the other way around. If LATIOS targets first and LATIOS hits with her projectile afterwards, it'll use her projectile's damage. And I opened up her page as well to show at level 9 how they compare. So level 9, 1645, 818, 1590, 791. And this shows at all levels as well. LATIOS will always have less damage on her Unite move than LATIOS', but that makes sense. She's a supporter. And she also gets her Unite move 1 level earlier and will usually be a level lower. What that means is if you're trying to combo with the burst damage, I would say generally follow your LATIOS' targeting. If your LATIOS targets a priority target with their Unite move, that's a great opportunity to follow up with yours, because it's going to stack a ton of damage on them and then give a bigger explosion with your move, Eon Blast. And the explosion does hit in an area around the Pokemon. So even if the explosion knocks them out, it'll still hit Pokemon around them to add that extra damage. It's very, very nice, a very good move. You can be interrupted during that 1.8 second charge, at which point you'll get refunded 90% of your Unite move charge. And it's a really common thing to have happen if you're using it too close to people. But you can use battle items during the Unite move. So if you have an eject button or an X speed to keep yourself away from opposing Pokemon, to make sure it goes off, I would really recommend using it then. Let's see, what else can we talk about with the moves? Like I said, I think Draco Meteor and Telekinesis is one obvious combo. Telekinesis doesn't really help much with farming, but obviously since wild Pokemon aren't going to be able to run out of the comments as quickly, the comments of Draco Meteor will usually all hit the wild Pokemon, or most of them will, and that'll give you an easier farming time in that sense. Whereas Dragon Pulse, I think, is great with Luster Purge, because Luster Purge helps with farming, and Dragon Pulse you have a harder time farming than Draco Meteor. Dragon Pulse Telekinesis is generally the lowest damage moveset and makes it the hardest to farm, which is why I don't recommend it. And Luster Purge Draco Meteor, while it gives you a lot of damage potentially, it doesn't really give you good ways of controlling fights or keeping yourself alive. Obviously be willing to experiment if you would like, but I would say generally the moves have their two categories. Let's see, what else is there to talk about now? Let's move on to items. So, one thing I forgot to mention that I should mention before we get into items. Dragon Pulse, since it's using a boosted attack, it will not trigger items like Shell Bell or Choice Specs. So we'll start with that first. Let's say we're using Dragon Pulse and Luster Purge as our moveset. I would say, before I talk more about items, that if you want a bigger in-depth item video, check out my Attackers Held Items guide in my guides playlist on my channel. But I would say really good items on Latios increase his special attack and cooldown reduction. So if you're using a moveset like this, I would say Drive Lens is super key, super good. And then your other items are going to be sort of dependent on what you need in the game. Shell Bell, obviously, I wouldn't use with the attack-based moveset, but we have other options, right? I wouldn't use Choice Specs either, but your special attack's your best stat, so why not boost it further with a percentage-based boost of Wise Glasses? And if they have a defensive lineup, Slick Spoon can help a lot as well. And I think this is a really solid set for this moveset, by the way. But if you need Curse is good as well, especially since the projectiles hitting your target will hit them over time, giving you a sort of damage over time effect on your Dragon Pulse and your Curse Incense, which is really nice. Also, you have the AoE of Luster Purge to apply that curse to multiple targets. Other moves that can be good, or other items that can be good, would include Energy Amp for the cooldown reduction. Remember, every time you're pressing your move, you're able to get Eon stacks by hitting your opponent. So, the more you press it, the more Eon stacks you get, so cooldown reduction helps a lot. So energy amp can be really good. If you're able to get your stacks off, I would really not recommend doing this, but if you are, fingers crossed, special attack specs can be really, really nice. I really wouldn't recommend too much else because, again, being really squishy, defensive items aren't going to do you a whole lot of good. You really just want to maximize your offense and be able to take out targets before they can be a threat to you. As for the other moveset, I would say, again, Drive Lens is really, really good. Curse Sentence is good with damage over time and AoE moves, but you can also consider Shell Bell again, which is nice because it gives you cooldown reduction. So you have more Draco Meteors you're throwing out, you can accumulate more Eon stacks more quickly. And as far as battle items goes, really I would only consider Eject Button and X Speed personally. I've seen some people that will use Full Heal to use their Unite move for sure. That's not a bad idea. But the lack of ability really hurts in lane and really hurts if you're using Draco Meteor. And I've seen X Attack as well because it gives you a ton of burst damage in the late game with your Unite move. But again, it doesn't give you any mobility or any survivability. I would say your best survivability option is Eject Button for the immediate relocation and disjoint, and X Speed can also help and has a lower cooldown. So if you like that, you like that. With that said, we'll talk about emblems now briefly. I have two emblem builds I made here. One is my special generalist set from my emblem guide video. You can check that one out in the playlist as well. But this set in general optimizes for special attack, HP, while also giving minor bonuses and other stats. And it gives green across the board pretty much, except for crit rate, which doesn't matter, and attack, which doesn't matter. So this is a good set if you just want to beef up your numbers and be generally more useful, help your survivability out just a little bit, which really helps in a Pokemon this squishy. Or if you really value cooldown reduction as much as I do, you can go a full cooldown reduction build with 7 black emblems and Mewtwo and Mew for an extra 0.6% from each. This will give you 6.2% or 5.2% cooldown reduction from these emblems alone, which if you stack with the items from this build, gives you another, what is that? 8.75% cooldown reduction. Really, really nice stuff, right? So if you're optimizing for cooldown reduction, that can be a super good build. Let's see, what else should we talk about? Let's talk about matchups and teammates. So, I would say that given Latios' nature as a very squishy target, and again, we can check the stats on this page, even at level 15, your worst stats by far are HP and your defenses. Being as squishy as Latios is, your best teammates and best lane partners are going to be ones that can shore up your weaknesses. They're going to be Pokemon that can be a good front line for you. So obviously, any melee supporter or defender is going to rank very highly here. One of the best go-to examples in my book is Snorlax, especially with block, because it provides a very stable wall for you to hide behind. Then your team's going to have a hard time getting past for you to be able to Eon stack from behind. Other good options can include Trevenant, because he's very, very stable, and Lapras, because she's very stable as well. Generally, stable defenders are the ones you want. Pokemon that aren't going to be doing a lot of their own independent game plan or moving around too much, you want them to stay closer to Latios where you can have them do so. Supporters this can apply to could be stuff like Wigglytuff, Mime, Clefable, you know, bodyguard supporters, people that are going to make you feel safe. Of course, Latios love laning with Latios for the Levitate bonuses, but I will say the one downside of them laning together is if you get ganked by a mid laner who messes with you, they are really going to mess with you. With this said, we'll get into the counter matchups. This is going to be most of your speedsters. Pokemon with a lot of high mobility and high burst damage really suck to fight against as Latios. So I would say if you're picking Latios, be careful of these Pokemon. And any all-rounders that play like them too. Stuff like Cerulege or Serena. Certain defenders can also give you problems as well. Greedent can be very annoying because he's very hard to kill and has the burst damage necessary to take you out. Same with something like Ho-Oh and Mamoswine. Generally Pokemon that can punish you by being close to your Pokemon you don't want to fight into. So Pokemon that can punish them, again, like your bodyguards, are really helpful. And any Pokemon that has long stuns or disables is really helpful too for helping you get Eon stacks. So again, stuff like Snorlax, Lapras freezing people, Umbreon with Mean Look, that's obviously really, really good. You have a lot of options from your teammates in that sense. With that said, I think I covered everything I want to cover in this video. So thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate you enjoying the Latios guide. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any questions, be sure to post them down there. I'll answer them as best I can. I'm also going to have at the end of this video links to both my guide playlist if you want to check out any other guides I have, including my LATIOS guide, and a playlist for LATIOS and LATIOS videos. So if you want to watch some LATIOS gameplay to sort of learn from and apply the things I was talking about, you can check it out there. I don't really know what else I have to say. That's pretty much it, y'all. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Thank you again. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. Follow me on Twitch, link in the description. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all today. Peace.